right, we are thrilled to be joined by David Goss. You may know him from the Extra Time podcast. He's also very knowledgeable about US youth soccer and was doing play-by-play for the GA Cup, where the Austin FC Academy did quite well. So, David, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. This is my favorite time of the year. This is my favorite week of the year. So when you messaged me, it just extends my GA Cup experience a little more. So I was happy to talk about it.
Well, we're thinking about making this just Austin FC Academy podcast based on how the first team results have been going.
Yeah, right. So. That's the safer space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned this is your favorite time of the year. It was in a different place this year. It's like it was in Florida and not in Frisco. How was that change?
Frisco maybe isn't the most fun place in the world, so I didn't miss that. And historically, the big conversation in Frisco is, I'm sure you guys know this better than I do, but it's really windy because it's like open space. I don't know. Someone explained one time it comes down from Oklahoma, the open plain and blah, blah, blah. But it's like so windy that game plans throughout the week are, how do we affect the game with the wind? And again, like that's how big of a factor it is. So I think that was the biggest change. And then I got to go to the beach for like half an hour after every day of games. So that was positive for me as well. But I think the facilities at FC Dallas are pretty impressive. And it's funny because, you know, we'll talk about some of the best academies in the world and what they do. Well, the facilities we have are better than everything on the planet. And so like when a Palmeiras and a Genk and a Valencia come to Toyota Stadium and the setup there, they're blown away. Where for us, it's like, oh, it's a Sunday, we're going to take our kids to a soccer tournament and there's going to be 97 fields and they're all going to be flat and, you know, top-notch like goals. We think it's normal, but they don't. But IMG is obviously impressive as well. And it was pretty fun. You know, spring break in Sarasota, Florida. I think that's the dream for anyone.
Well, we're glad that you got to come to Austin last year and experience a different part of Texas that's not Frisco.
Very different. Less strip malls.
Yeah. All right, jumping into the tournament. The Austin FC U15s won the whole thing. They beat the Philadelphia Union in penalties. Their other wins were against the Revs, the Crew, San Jose, Red Bulls, and then Club America and Genk. And you guys said on the broadcast, Genk is like, if you look at the Belgian national team for the last 10 years, half these guys went through this academy. And so beating a team like that is a big deal. On top of that, Vigo Ortiz was named MVP of the tournament for the U15 age group. I've watched a lot of this U17 group for Austin and a couple of the guys who have aged out now, but I've not really seen much of this group. You've probably seen more of them than I have at this point. What stood out to you about this U15 group from Austin?
So I think when you talk about players at this age, you're talking for the most part about players who still have more individual flair and creativity and are a little less coached down. The 17s, you get closer to more professionalized, but the international teams come in at the U15 level already at that. And so when you talk about a Genk, you talk about a team that never beats themselves, never overexposes themselves, never opens up too much, sort of manages a lot of games and then finds a moment where you'll beat yourself. And Austin beat them because Austin was capable of doing that too. And that's rare at this level. So a back line that never overexposes, you know, fullbacks that for this Austin team, and Nate Atkinson and Cole Coughlin, for the most part, they pushed up and were creative, but managed it well where they rotated three or Landry Moncrief, the defensive midfielder, would drop in. A lot of things you see with the first team, it was similar in this group. And so their ability to play professionally, I think, and have professional performances is rare at the U15 level. And then obviously their ability to control possession and beat teams in possession. And so I think Vigo Ortiz was the bright spot, 1v1, beating guys, sort of relieving pressure in games where the ball was against them in those moments. And Cala Jimenez, who scored a couple of goals, was the other big piece that was capable of doing that. But for the most part, it was like dominating the ball, moving it around, and then playing out through Gavin Wolf, who is Owen Wolf's brother and Josh Wolf's youngest son. And they told me they think he might be the best of the Wolves, even though he's a defender. That's, I think, the way they termed it.
Were you surprised
Obviously,
by how big he is?
sort of, but he looks like a wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all look so similar. And I think, not I think, he's been playing mainly with the 17. So for him, this is a cool thing that happens at GA Cup, which is this is sort of a testing point for academies once a year. And so for the most part, you will see players play with their ages. So, you know, better players, to push them, you move them up in age group to challenge them. And now with MLS Next Pro, some push them into professional ranks. And those players will be brought down a lot of times in GA Cup. And the responsibility there is to be a leader, right? Because when you are a young player in a group where everyone's older than you, you're just trying to hold on. And eventually the hope is you'll be a pro who will be a leader and, you know, one day be a captain of a club, whatever it is. That opportunity comes when you come back down to your age group. So that was sort of what Gavin Wolf was tasked with. And he was awesome the entire tournament.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to follow up on this tweet that you sent yesterday, sort of about what this means. You said, more importantly, identity from the first team down through the academy coaches and players is built strong. Can you expand on that a little bit?
With academies and, you know, with everything, I think for a lot of people, if you have no concept of what we're talking about, think college sports, where you have sort of classes. So some schools are always good, and some schools have a special class that challenges for 2 years, and then they wait 6 years to come back. So in the academy setup, you have a lot of clubs where they have a good team. The things that Austin were successful with and the things that Austin have built are repeatable. They are a cohesive identity, like I just talked about, a team that played very similar to the first team, a team that understands the identification of the players they want, because that's one of the advantages that a Red Bulls and Philly have always had, which is they have a unique style. So they are not always recruiting the same player as Chicago and LAFC and whoever else, because they're fitting guys into their profile, which is high pressing, high intensity, continued run, stuff like that. Austin's is the opposite. But Austin has that identity, so they can go out and recruit players that maybe aren't exactly who everyone else is looking at, which gives you a little bit of an advantage. All of those things are repeatable, and all of those things help players move through the pathway, and that's what I saw at this tournament. And so when I think of the best clubs that I've seen in Major League Soccer, that's the formula. And that's what really excited me about Austin. Alejandro Oliveros was the coach of this team. Every conversation, Josh Wolf came up, Greg Berhalter came up, the style came up, and the concepts all the way through. And so to have a U15 coach who understands it and is embodying it, and the players are understanding it, that is what's going to give you a pathway so that players can step through. And the idea behind that is, Red Bulls worded this best to me one time, of like, when you move up from the 15s to the 17s to the second team to the first team, it's the same lingo. The positional responsibilities are the same. So the players are faster. The competition's harder. But you technically know what you're required, right? Cole Coughlin was the captain of this team, the right back. If he were to play tomorrow in MLS Next Pro, he'd be overwhelmed by the speed, the physicality, and maybe some of the technique. But he would know what his role at right back is under a coach he's never played for, with players he's never played with, because it is cohesive.
Yeah, that brings up a point that I've thought about some with this Austin FC Academy, is the types of players that they're recruiting. I see some of the kids on the U17 team who are some of the better players, but have maybe not gotten national team call-ups like some of their teammates have. And I think some of that maybe has to do with like style of play. Like it's not what the national team's looking for. Maybe they're not there size-wise yet. But I guess like the difference, tell me if this is right, but the difference in this and college football, like you mentioned, like this isn't Nebraska recruiting option quarterbacks who are never going to go pro. Like these kids could still do it, just in a different way, maybe, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you might reach a level where, let's just put out a name right now, Jack McGlynn might not be on the national team as much as he should, because maybe he doesn't fit the style, right? Maybe he's not the player they're looking for, but that doesn't mean he won't go for $25 million to the club in Europe who does play that style. So you're 100% right. I would also say, I think national team stuff is really nice. It's a great experience for the players. It's still a way to increase your value in the transfer market. And that's why MLS teams are happy to let players leave during a season for a U20 World Cup, a U17 World Cup. It's a way for players to get identified, which is great for them. I think the value of youth national teams has decreased as the quality of professional academies has increased. It's like we're in Bradenton, which used to be the only professional academy in America. It was the U.S. residency program. The facilities, the training, the schooling at 27 of the MLS clubs is now equal to what that was. And so I do think, as much as we talk about the youth national teams, because it's just a barometer for some things, they can only see so many players. Players get better, players get worse. It goes up and down. And I worry that we overvalue it sometimes with the way our setup is now.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh no. See, we're gonna step over each other. Okay, Landon, go ahead. What do you want to ask?
No, go for it. You're up.
All right. We talked about this international competition. And I think you even mentioned on the broadcast, like this was just not that way in the past, right? I think at some point in the last several years, MLS started bringing international clubs into
It started in 2013. Was the
in 2013?
Yeah.
It's like, so now 10 years in, how do MLS teams stack up overall?
It's gotten better. The first 5-6 years, and my first few years going down, maybe we'd get an MLS team in a semifinal, maybe, and maybe it would be FC Dallas, maybe it would be Red Bulls. And then from 2019 on, it has shifted. And MLS teams have the ability to contend at a higher level. Seattle won the U17 level twice. Portland won the U15 level last year. And now Austin wins the U15 level this year. Philadelphia winning the 17s. That is very new. So for the first 6 years with international teams, only international teams won. And they added more as it went along. So the first year was like Stoke City and one other team, and Stoke won it. But historically, MLS teams struggled. And then around 2018, 2019, you saw, I think, the technical level come up for MLS teams, because soccer at times, especially in competitions like this, can be a weak link sport. And so River Plate and Monaco don't have weak links. And MLS teams did, because they were putting together rosters. Guys didn't know each other. Players weren't as well developed. And so you saw MLS teams struggle in big moments. And then as the quality increased and the depth increased, then you got, I think, platforms to see star players shine. And now you're starting to see MLS young players like a Gio Reyna be able to be on a platform to compete, where for River Plate, they're 10 and they're 9, like Enzo Fernandez and Julian Alvarez, who played in this tournament in the past. They could shine because the center backs and the fullbacks were solid, right? No one was going to lose a game, and that gives you the platform to shine. So that's all come along. And then the big thing over the last 4 or 5 years is like that little extra competitiveness. Knowing when the game's against you, it's your throw in and the ball happens to trickle a little bit farther. And now it takes you longer to throw it back in. And you get you give up a foul, but you lay in front of it and you kill the quick restart. A lot is the 50-50 of like knowing the one you can't lose. Whether it's a foul or a clean tackle, it doesn't matter. You cannot lose that moment. MLS kids struggled with that first international competition for a while. And I think that's one of the big changes we saw this year, of like understanding those big moments. I go back to the Austin Genk game. That's a match MLS teams have lost in the past, whether it's in penalty kicks, like consistently, but mainly in stoppage time.
And you're saying just based on like the savviness element, right?
Yeah. The savviness, tuned in the whole time, professionalism. And it's tough to say that because you're talking about really young kids, but it exists in a lot of these international academies where, I chatted with the Palmeiras director, and he said, if we see a kid who's good, we'll bring him in for 2 weeks trial. If we think he's better at the position than the player in our academy, that guy gets kicked out. It's like those players are always on. There isn't a lazy 50-50 in the 75th minute of a game because they always have to be locked in. MLS teams didn't have that. And I think MLS teams have grown there a lot. And so it's awesome to see them win the way they did at this tournament. It is not normal. So it's not like, oh, an MLS team will always win, and it was Austin this year. Like that is super rare. At the 17s level, it was a little skewed. Boca Juniors and River Plate were not able to get their visas at the last minute, so they got pulled out, and that was obviously big losses. Those are big academies. But yeah, this is pretty rare, and the tournament was built for this, for international teams to come and beat MLS teams, and like for kids to learn and coaches to learn and directors to learn. Oh, we need more. We need to get further. Like this is the next level. This is how we get there.
So you've mentioned a few success stories from MLS academies and some of the other guys internationally who have come and played in this tournament. I think here in Austin, and probably in a lot of places, but like Austin specifically, we're new to this whole academy thing. Like we've not watched generations of these kids come through. The youngest team, like the very first Austin Academy team that ever started, is now the oldest group of the U17
Right.
team. And so this is our first time going through this. I think a lot of fans have visions of like, okay, in a few years, we're going to have 5 homegrown starting for the Austin FC first team. And the reality is like, that's not really usually how it works. Like what, just on a, let's say a given MLS Academy team, how many of these kids can we expect to make it, I guess, A, to an MLS first team, and then B, to like continue playing pro at all?
It's a good question, and it's changing a lot every year. So there's no clean answer. And with Austin, I think you get into a space where like, well, what's the comp? You know, are we talking FC Dallas? Are we talking Red Bulls? Are we talking Montreal? Are we talking Nashville? Like, I think it's pretty. You guys are a tough one because of your market, because of the way the club is built, because I think the ethos of the club. Like, my guess would be they will try and push more players in than not. And I think for star players and whatever, the hope is you get 1 or 2 out of each team to get to the professional ranks successfully and be a part of your first team. And one of the big things we talk about now is like that can also mean a good trade. That could mean 400,000 allocation money because another team values that player over you. That's fine, right? That's still value to your team. And then the hope is an Owen Wolf or a Gavin Wolf gets sold for millions of dollars to a European team, and that changes your club in a lot of ways as well. I feel like Austin could be a team like Red Bulls where your backup left back, your backup right back, your backup center mid, your grinder winger, your backup center forward could be from your academy because the DNA of your club is so specific that that player through your academy should give you similar things to what a Will Bruin brings, right?
Yeah.
Will Bruin brings experience, but what you're looking for is minutes and spot starts, fitting in when you don't have someone else. And so my hope is for a club like that, you'll see 5 or 6 guys. Maybe it's from the 13th to the 19th roster spot, but those pieces, why instead of getting a Hector Jimenez and getting a Will Bruin, why couldn't they be academy players? And I think with the DNA of Austin being so specific, it would make sense that those guys would be that. And then your hope is there are 1 or 2 special players who come through. And I think Austin, I don't want to say lucky because it's good, but like you get Danny Pereira out of the draft year 1, Owen Wolf comes through because Josh has incredible DNA. So like you're a step ahead what an expansion team normally would be in that you'll probably sell 2 players before your academy's even running, which gives time for it to bridge the gap. And what we saw, I think Columbus is actually a decent comp. Columbus basically rebuilt their academy since Tim Bezbachenko took over. Rebuilt, maybe even a kind word because it didn't exist properly. They won MLS Next Pro last year, but didn't do it with academy pieces mainly. They did it with like young signings, which is a lot of what we see from Austin FC too, because as you said, the first age group is still only 17 and 18. So you're trying to fill in that gap where the hope would be in a year or two, the 2 team is a ton of academy pieces. The ones are pushing through to the first team. And then that pipeline, once it's built, you just keep filling it as it goes along.
I'm not sure how much you got to see of the Austin U17s at GA Cup. I think they only had maybe 1 game televised, and so I didn't really get to see it. But did you get to see him? Like, did you get to see him much at all anyway, or did you hear much about them?
I only saw that 1 game. I wasn't on the call, so I was hanging out watching 3 other games. I did their game last year, that group. So I've seen a couple of the pieces. I really like the center mids in that group, but I did not get to see a ton of them at this tournament.
Yeah, I know they had. I think they lost 2 of their group games on penalties, but then went on and won 3 showcase games after that. And so, yeah, kind of an unlucky thing. I'm curious. I haven't gotten to see them much since Micah Burton hasn't been playing with them, and so I'm curious if they're kind of struggling to replace the production that he brought with that team. But there's some really good kids. I don't. Did Irvin Torres play in the game that
I
you saw?
believe he was there. Yes,
That
I
kid's
have to go
good.
back and look. Yeah, he
Um,
was he was one of the ones that stood out to me last year. One of the other center mids I was like in love with the way he like set the tone. And Mike is the other one. Mike is special. I don't know what position. I asked every Austin person I saw the whole week, what position is Micah Burton? Everyone has a different answer, which I
yeah, man.
appreciate.
I mean, the answer is all of them so far, right?
Yeah,
With the first team, he's played on the right wing. Not the first team, sorry, the second team, Austin FC 2. I think he's been playing on the right wing with the last US national team games that
he
he
was the
played in.
center forward.
He played some center forward, but his best minutes I thought came on the right wing.
So
And so,
last year, I talked to Gonzalo Cigars, who coaches that USU 17 team, and he said, I don't have a center forward. So Michael Burton is my center forward. And he wasn't saying it as much of like that's his role as he can and we need it, which I think is fine. Like showing positional flexibility is great. I think it enhances his game to like have played with your back to goal to understand that spacing and that movement. But I talk to people in Austin who think he's a center forward. And I've talked
really?
to others
Okay.
who think he's a right winger. So I think it's up in the air. It's interesting in your system because if you don't have a Druisi underneath you, Druisi, obviously I'm going to make the mistake right now. Then like there is more creativity that can come out of that position, I think. And like the way he plays, and if no one's seen him play, when he comes inside, like he's a 1v1 menace. So that's where the confusion for a lot of people comes. He's like not very big. And so it seems like a waste to use him at center forward. But he can find spaces where he can do what he does best, I think, out of that position. And I think the big idea is like he scores it the way he does. Why would you not always want him between the posts? Why would you not always
Yeah.
want him in a goal scoring area?
Yeah, I will say last year he went into national team camp and they played him there and I thought he looked lost. And then this most recent camp he played center forward. I was like, oh, he kind of looks like he knows what he's doing now. And so like maybe one day he'll be there, but who knows? Um, one other thing we wanted to ask you about is this is not well, it's kind of specifically about Austin FC, but Paul Tenorio reported that there had been widespread academy recruiting tampering going on, and he named Austin FC as one of the biggest offenders of this. We were talking a little bit off air, and you said that it's not exactly what it sounds like. Can you maybe share some of the information that you know about that situation?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% reporting any of this because the details are still a little bit, but my understanding of the situation is what happened was there used to be MLS homegrown territories where every player in that territory was that club's player. They had first rights and you couldn't touch any of them. If you came in and brought one of those players, if you wanted to put them on a professional contract, you would have to agree a deal with the club that was their native club of where they came from. The rule has just changed where you have 45 players in your academy at all age groups, not per team. So from U19 or 18, depending on the club, all the way down to U12, depending on the club. Outside of that, you're allowed to add 9 additional names that are protected on your list. So 54 players. So Chicago, massive city, can only protect 54 players. This rule is new. And so my understanding of what Major League Soccer tried to do was they put this rule in, and then they looked backwards and said, well, all of these teams have acquired these players over the last year plus, and it doesn't really fit this ruling because they were operating under other rules. So they made a bunch of rulings and judgments retroactively fine them, which I think was the wrong term. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion has come, that it feels like shady or dark or whatever. Fine them to like put a bow on that. And from now on, this is the rule. You cannot go and talk to those 9 players outside of the club. You cannot talk to the players inside the club. My understanding is there were some clubs in some markets that basically the 9 players they listed were all players that were already in other academies. And then they got money. We don't know if it's allocation money. We're not quite sure how the punishment works. We don't know the numbers at all. For all of them, and every 3 months, I think you can reset the list. So now moving forward, they're going to change to actual players who are in their market. So what I think you saw was clubs that recruit more. They were the ones who got hit because they're the ones doing it. So when you look at this Austin team, you look at players, I think they have players from Colorado, from Iowa, from California, Philly with their YSC Academy, which is a home state program in a school. They obviously recruit from all across the country. But I think one of the things this will fix is like Caden Clark, who's a Red Bull homegrown, is from Minnesota. He moved to Arizona for an academy, then he moved to New York. New York had to trade Minnesota something so that they could acquire his homegrown rights to sign him out of their academy. There have been teams that have just said no, and then those players can't play in Major League Soccer because they don't want to sign for the team they never played for and the team they didn't. So they're trying to fix that. And I think the way this whole thing came out sounded shadier than it was, and I think it's kind of okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the reaction from a lot of Austin fans when this came out was essentially like, if you're not cheating, then you're not trying. And especially with a rule that a lot of people already consider kind of dumb anyway.
A lot of it's tough, yeah.
And so like, I think that, yeah, the biggest thing like is if we lost allocation money, then yeah, that matters. Especially if you're spending first team allocation money on academy lottery tickets, essentially, then that's maybe a little bit tough. But it's kind of cool to know that the academy is trying that hard as well, because it's a thing they've said they were going to take seriously. And I think with this win in the GA Cup, with what you're saying about kind of the professionalism of the structure all the way through, it's cool to see that it seems like they mean it. And I hope that they can kind of continue pushing that.
And I would add this. So they brought player Juan Rivera to this tournament, who was born in 2009. So he was playing up a year with the U15s.
Oh, wow.
And he played as a center forward. He came off the bench. They say that his class, so the U15s, is the most Austin heavy group or Austin area.
U14s, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they're the most Austin naturally heavy group that they've had. And Alejandro Oliveros, who's the coach of this team, who was awesome all tournament, so shout out to him. 1, congrats, and 2, thank you for being very nice to me and helpful.
I've gotten to speak with him a few times. He's a very
great
nice
guy. Hook 'em horns. He's all about Austin. He couldn't wait to get out of Florida. He could not wait to get back to Austin at the end of this thing. He's been around. He coached high school soccer. He's from he's lived there for 20 plus years. He says it's the best group of talent he's ever seen come out of Austin. So hopefully, this won't be a factor for them for a little while, because now they'll fix their system and figure it out. But that, I think, is something that people should be really excited about, because to me, as a fan, that's what I want to see. But I think that's one of the silver bullets for Major League Soccer of like, how do you break through? How do you beat out the Premier League, but also beat out NBA and NHL and NFL? No other sport in America can like actually say these are local players that you get to go root for, right? The rare one-off where you draft a guy whose dad was a fan of the team 50 years ago.
Or played at the college 2 hours away or whatever.
Exactly. But like, imagine the opportunity to watch Austonians step on the field consistently and play in CCL and Leagues Cup and go play in the Club World Cup and like represent their city, I think is pretty special. And that's the hope for the way this whole thing's being built.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing all of your wisdom, David.
We didn't have to talk about the first team. We talked about championships.
Exactly.
What a great episode.
Yeah. We still have to do that part, but we won't make you do that. But okay, folks can find you on Extra Time every week. Is there anything else you want to plug? Anywhere else folks should look out for you?
I am on the Total Soccer Show every Tuesday. So if you don't listen to that, you should listen to it. You know, we kind of do the same stuff, me and Paul, had it basically back and forth for an hour on the show last week, right after he broke that story. Joe Lowery's on it, Taylor Rockwell. You can follow me on Twitter at Empire Gas, GASS, pronounced gas, but spelled gas. And no, I think that's kind of it. You should watch any youth stuff we do. So I think we're going to broadcast a couple more tournaments, hopefully coming up later this year.
My wife is so excited about that. Like, there's not enough soccer in our life that she got to watch. She got to watch the FC2 game, the GA Cup, and LAFC all this weekend.
Did you guys go to the next pro opener?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, it was wild.
How cool was it?
It was so cool. It felt like a high school football game, and like
Friday Night Lights.
Absolutely, and like I know that means different things for people in different parts of the country, but in Texas, that's a compliment.
Well, we've all seen the movie, so we get that part.
It was very cool, and like people chanting Kip Keller's name after the game, nice. And like it was just like it was pretty special. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna try to go out to as many of those games as I can.
Yeah, they're the most games you watch. It's an empty stadium, so Austin fans keep going, because if I have to broadcast those games, I prefer Austin fans being in a crowd.
Yeah, well, David, I am not just saying this because you're here. I would say this if you weren't here, but I really, really do enjoy your commentary on Extra Time, but also your play-by-play during these youth tournaments.
Thank you.
I think you do a great job keeping the narrative going, saying what's going on, but also providing insight. That's my favorite type of broadcaster, and I think you do a great job at it. So thank you.
Appreciate that. It is, as I said, my favorite week of the year. Going into it, it's miserable. It's a grind and everything. And then you get there, and I think what I've come to realize is there's really great, passionate soccer minds and soccer people. And in a way, they're all working in the same direction. Less now. It used to all be, we're going to win a World Cup collaborative. And now it's, I want to win an MLS Cup, and I want this kid to play for my club, and we want to sell them overseas. But I come out so energized by just like the conversations we're having and the amount I learn. And I think it's special for these kids, because you talked about high school football. For all of us, like growing up, you play high school sports in front of your crowd. These kids don't actually play in front of a crowd that often, because they play academy games. They're a bit sequestered. They're in empty stadiums. So it's fun to be able to put this on for them and like make them feel like it's a big deal. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. It helps when your team wins. Everyone like referees. Everyone likes us when they win.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, David. Appreciate it.